meeting to order, please. Will the clerk please call the roll? Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped three things. My list of who's supposed to do what is missing. So you know the order, clerk?
Yes, Councilor Villarreal will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilor Harris, the salute to the New Mexico flag. And Councilor Vigil Koppler will do the invocation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dear Lord, we meet to serve our community, to use our resources wisely and well, to represent all members of our community fairly, to make decisions that promote the common good. We recognize our responsibility to the past and the future and the rights and needs of both individuals and community. As trusted servants, we seek blessings on our deliberations and on our efforts here today. May we act wisely and well. And dear Lord, please indulge us as we welcome the demons into the chamber. Please help them help us to keep on the straight and narrow. Thank you.
You want to see if anybody else?
Yes. Does anyone on the governing body have any condolences or remembrances or anything to add to say? Councilor Rivera?
Thank you. Would have been my father's birthday on March 29th. You can just help me in honoring him.
Take a minute. Thank you, Counselor. Now,
You got it.
City Clerk, I apologize.
No
Could
worries.
you please call the roll?
Mayor Weber,
Present.
Councilor Beta,
Present.
Councilor Harris, Councilor Ives,
Here.
Councilor Lindell, Councilor Rivera, Councilor Romero Worth,
Here.
Councilor Vigil Koppler,
Here.
Councilor Villarreal.
Present.
Thank you. You do have a quorum present, Mayor.
Thank you very much, City Clerk. Can we approve the agenda? Is there a motion? Second? Thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. The consent calendar. Who has something they'd like to call to our attention? Councilor Lindell.
Thank you, Mayor. I realize that it's just a notice to publish, but I would like to have a brief discussion or comment on R2.
Yes, Councilor.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to remove R1 just for a comment or question.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay.
Move for approval.
Second.
Okay. Could you please call the roll?
This will be approval of the consent
Amended.
calendar as amended.
Yes, correct.
Councilor Beta,
Yes.
Councilor Harris. That was a yes. Thank you. Councilor Ives,
Yes.
Councilor Lindell,
Yes.
Councilor Rivera,
Yes.
Councilor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Councilor Vigil Koppler,
Yes.
Councilor Villarreal,
Yes.
Mayor Weber.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion is approved.
Thank you. Item 8, the approval of the minutes from our March 13th meeting. Is there a motion, or are there amendments that need to be made?
Move to approve.
Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Counselor Vigil Koppler, I think you have something special for us tonight. Could you please take the floor?
Sit down. Now that's what we like to hear. Go Demons. Yahoo! So Counselor Villarreal and I share the distinction of being graduates from Santa Fe High School. A long time ago, which we won't say when. But I'm very happy to have her beside me because there's nothing like demon spirit, and you all know that. We're here tonight because we are just so incredibly proud of our Santa Fe High School Demons and the basketball team and coaches here tonight. We just think you are absolutely wonderful. You've done such great things, and we'd like to honor you. And I just want to give you those introductory comments, and then we'll carry on from there. But Counselor Villarreal has something she'd like to say.
Thank you. I have a few things to say, so bear with me. I graduated from Santa Fe High in '93, and I'm a former Demonette Athlete of the Year. And I wanted to personally take this opportunity to thank all the coaches, family members, administration, for being an incredible support system for these players. I had the opportunity to attend a number of games this season, along with a consistent group of my friends from class of '93, and we were thoroughly impressed not only by the level of skill that you all have, but also the teamwork that was happening on and off the court. I appreciate your sportsmanship, and you guys displayed a lot of that throughout the season. I think what was most impressive is that when you saw the sportsmanship with the teams and refs, even though there were calls that were bad or even though the other team didn't always have integrity. I also wanted to take this time to reflect on the pit games and during the championship. I was overwhelmed with a lot of emotion like many people were at the game. There were so many people from Santa Fe High and from Santa Fe and around. I had friends that flew into town to see the game. And so there was a lot of emotion. And sure, state title was amazing and awesome, but it doesn't compare to watching you, a team that was rising to the whole time, facing adversity throughout the season. There were injuries, there were illnesses, and so I just think that you pushed through it all with a lot of patience, perseverance, and passion. And I wanted to thank these young men for Capital City together. This was a team that showed not just heart and hustle, but also family that really helped you to succeed, and you all did that together. And I wanted to thank Cole. I appreciate all the work you did, that you did, and the rest of the coaching staff and the entire team, even the cheerleaders, the wives of the coaches. I think it was just the whole team gave us a big spark and revived the pride of Santa Fe High School Demon alum and supporters. So I just wanted to let you guys know that you will go on to great things, and the memories of this season will bring you a lot of pride and have brought us a lot of pride in the entire city. So thank you so much.
I want you to understand that just because she said what year she graduated, I will not be touching that. But I will. I was a varsity in my day, and in order to equalize the time, what if I do a cheer for you? Just kidding. Just kidding. But sincerely, everything Renee said, just one word to take away, pride. We are so proud of you and how you have brought our city together. And so we want to share with you and the rest of the group what you've been up to these days. So take a look. While Joe is working, Joe Abeta. Okay. While Joe is working on that. Joe is our Joe Abeta is our city videographer extraordinaire. He makes the most wonderful videos, and you can catch him on YouTube under the City of Santa Fe. And you might want to know a little about our governing body and our city. And you can. I know you all know how to use YouTube. So some material you can catch on to City of Santa Fe. Okay. Okay, sounds good.
If we can get that to happen, we'll get that.
Okay, so while Joe's working on it, what we are going to do is, first of all, let's call the coaches and the staff and the. Come on up with us.
Yeah.
Wow, so tall. Look how tall you guys are. Oh my God. Congratulations to everyone. So you wanna go? Just let them. All right.
All right.
So you all are taller than we are, so you get to stand back there. That's good. We won't hide anybody.
You want to go with this?
Okay, Coach, if you will. Where is Coach? Come up front. Thank you. Okay, so whereas the Santa Fe High School Demon Boys basketball team competed in the Mexico State Basketball Championship Tournament for the first time in 41 years, and whereas the Santa Fe High School Demon Boys basketball team gave their collective hearts and souls, played a stellar championship game at the Pit on Saturday, 2019, and won the hearts and souls of Santa Fe. And whereas the Santa Fe High School Demon basketball team had a remarkable 2018-2019 season, and whereas the Santa Fe High School Demon basketball team of young men with their coaches, parents, friends, and staff brought the city of Santa Fe together in a deep craze, a spirit like no other, where the city police and fire departments escorted the team out of the city toward their journey south to the Pit to show all what hard perseverance and team spirit looks like.
Nothing but net.
Yay! Woo! Yes. Okay, I'm going to continue. Whereas the city of Santa Fe and near and far are very proud and appreciative of these fine young men for capacity, perseverance, their work ethic, their willingness to go the extra mile, their extraordinary sportsmanship, they're coming together as a team and putting team above self for the greater good and for their ability to show Santa Fe that all good things can happen, including bringing a city together in celebration of greatness.
Okay, let me finish this off, and then we will give them the round of applause. Now, therefore, I, Alan M. Weber, Mayor of the City of Santa Fe, New Mexico, do hereby proclaim Wednesday, March 27, 2019, as
Santa Fe High Basketball Demon Day.
Hey!
on behalf of the coaches and our players and our school, we would like to thank you guys for recognizing us. These boys have done an amazing job, and they should be recognized. And we feel proud of bringing some pride back. It always feels good to hear alumni talk about that. That word pride sticks with us. So, and that's what these guys are. They're about one another. They're about each other. They didn't put them, any one of them over their to accomplish great things. And to our seniors, we have 6 of them here, and thank them. They really for this to be continued success and not just a one-year thing. So we hope that our showing this year can just lead to more positive things. So thank you guys for recognizing. I would like to introduce the players and the coaches real quick. Okay, so I'll stand off to the side. We have Derek Solano, senior Derek Solano. We have senior manager Santos Leyva. Santos. We have another one of our seniors, Ramon Roybal. Okay, we have one of our seniors, the general, Tony. We have our tallest, but one of our youngest players in the program. We have J.B. White. We have Derek Carlton. He's as well. We got Christian Kavanaugh as a senior. A.K.A. Cavs. He goes by Cavs in our program. We have Rodavlas Hernandez, senior. He goes by Dove. It's easier to say Dove, so. Cody Garcia is a sophomore in our program. We have Cruz Martinez, who's another sophomore in our program. Mr. Jaden Block is a sophomore in our program. Mr. Joseph Lopez Ramos is a freshman in our program. And we have assistant coach Francisco Rivera. Assistant coach Greg Sandoval. And we have assistant coach Francisco Rivera Sr. So, as you guys can see, a good balance of upperclassmen who are great leaders, and we have some very talented underclassmen as well. So, again, recognizing the boys means a lot.
Well, I think everything else tonight is downhill after that. There's not much more to be done. All right. Thank you to our alumni. Nicely done. That was good soul. Okay, items removed. Consent calendar. We got to get back to work. I think we only have 2 items on the consent calendar that got removed. So Councilor Vihil-Coppler, you wanted to address R1.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you look on the resolution on page 4, page 4, F2, I just want to note that there is no maximum on that. So I just want everybody to understand, and while this doesn't have anything to do with a degree of trust or otherwise, except that city managers in the future, you just don't know. But I really wonder, can this go up to $1 million? Are we giving the city manager that much latitude? And I thought this was going to come back through committee. And I haven't seen it at committee, so I'm surprised because I thought it was going to be withdrawn or postponed because it's been postponed at several committees, and it hasn't come back at least to Public Works. I know that, and I could be wrong, but that's one thing. But the other thing is, I don't know if anybody has any concern about more than 60,000.
You might hit the button. Thank you.
There we go.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Mr. Mayor, Council Vihil-Coppler, it is actually going back to PWC. The timing of these things it sometimes escapes me, but it went to council for request to publish first, then it's going back to PWC, and then it's going back to council for approval. So.
Is that normal where we publish things that we haven't vetted through committee? I mean, I'm okay with getting ahead of things. I'm okay with that. Okay.
On that point, that has been our practice in the past.
So we publish the notice, then it goes back, then it goes through, then it comes forward.
Yes. We have not let the fact that it hasn't gotten final review by all committees public. Certainly to do that after that process is complete. We have done that often, well, a number of times in the past.
So, Mr. Mayor, as I understand, we're only approving the publishing of the notice.
Correct.
We're not approving the ordinance.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, now you know what my question's going to be.
We're ready.
And I'm all for speeding things up, as you may have guessed. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. So we need to...
So I move to approve to publish.
Okay. Second. Okay.
Yes. To publish Bill of 2019-3 for April 24th.
Yes.
Councilor Harris. Yes. Councilor Ives.
Yes.
Councilor Lindell. Thank you. Councilor Rivera.
Yes.
Councilor Romero-Worth. Yes. Councilor Vihil-Coppler.
Yes.
Councilor Villarreal.
Yes.
Councilor Beta.
Yes.
Mayor Weber.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion is approved.
Thank you. And now we have part R2, not to be confused with R2D2. And what happens with R2, Councilor Lindell?
Not much tonight. I just comment on this. I know this is a notice to publish and it'll go back through some committees. I would really encourage us as a governing body. We've got a couple of things coming forward regarding banners on poles, light poles, in different parts and for different purposes. I would really encourage us as a governing body to look at this not as individual projects, but to come up with policy that would serve the city well and be careful of the precedent that we set with these, and also careful of cost allocation and being careful not to the anti-donation cause with them. I just wanted to make those comments and encouraging people to bring these forward to perhaps look at some other cities' regulations on them and make sure that we have good policy and procedure, because we have different things on a couple of different tracks at the same time. So that's all I had, and with that, I'll make a motion to approve.
Second?
Okay.
Councillor Ives?
Yes.
Councillor Lindell?
Yes.
Councillor Rivera?
Yes.
Councillor Romero Worth?
Yes.
Councillor Hill Coppler?
Yes.
Councillor Villarreal?
Yes.
Councillor Rebecca?
Yes.
Councillor Harris? Mayor Weber?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion has been approved.
Thank you. And with that, we come to
Going to item number 11.
number 11, request for approval of award bid. Oh, I know you're here.
So this item has been through committee. However, at the Public Works or Public Utilities agenda and the Finance Committee, the actual titles on the agendas were incorrect. So this is here before you so that we can have item 1 addressed at $385,000. It was noted on each of those agendas at $325,000.
Okay, so it was incorrectly identified previously.
Correct.
Okay. Do you want to, are there any, I guess we have to do these individually. All right, so I suppose you might just give us a quick overview and then we'll try to move through them one at a time.
Yes, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. The request for the first contract for Corolla Engineers is for the amount of $385,000. We've gone through committee for both the scope of services and for the funding amount, and we had a clarification for the total dollars.
Okay. And while you're up, second item?
Yes, that basically was consistent, so it is for a request for the complete $450,000 exclusive of GRT.
Okay. And there is a subsection.
So that's requesting that a budget adjustment be approved so that essentially we can implement this work under our capital improvement program.
Okay. Are there any things? Harris? Nope, you good?
Again, this is attracted a lot of attention here recently. I think we are all familiar with the questions. I'm very comfortable with the potential award, and I'll make a motion to approve.
So we're doing one at a time, right?
Yes.
Item
Correct.
11-1.
To Corolla.
Second?
Okay.
Councillor Lindell?
Yes.
Councillor Rivera?
Yes.
Councillor Romero Worth? Yes. Councillor Vihel Coppler? Yes. Councillor Villarreal?
Yes.
Councillor Rebecca?
Yes.
Councillor Harris?
Yes.
Councillor Ives? Weber?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion is approved.
Which now takes us to item 11-2.
Yes, Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to approve item 11-2, the award to Hayes and Sawyer.
Second?
Councillor Rivera?
Yes.
Councillor Romero Worth? Councillor Vihel Coppler? Yes. Councillor Villarreal?
Yes.
Councillor Rebecca?
Yes.
Councillor Harris?
Yes.
Councillor Ives?
Yes.
Councillor Lindell?
Yes.
And Mayor Weber.
Yes.
Motion for 11.
11-2A also considered. Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Could you call the roll?
Yes. Councillor Romero Worth? Councillor Ziegler?
Yes.
Yes.
Councillor Rebecca?
Yes.
Councillor Harris?
Yes.
Councillor Ives?
Yes.
Councillor Lindell?
Yes.
Councillor Rivera?
Yes.
Mayor Weber.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion is approved.
Thank you. Item 12 on our agenda tonight is an information briefing from Mark Duran, who is seemingly recovered from his 60-day journey into the Roundhouse. Welcome back, Mark. I leave it to you. The floor is yours to talk us through the session and what you think are the highlights and most important things we need to consider.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor, councilors. As you know, we have completed a 60-day legislative session. I have provided you a written report. I will just give you a brief report now and sort of summarize the major accomplishments or the major sections, really, of the bill that I provided to you. First of all, from overall, I think very successful. That's really for you to determine. But we were successful on a number of statutory pieces of legislation that were in our resolution. First and foremost, we prevented any changes to our hold harmless payments. That was a number one priority. We were successful at that. The other piece of legislation we were successful on was House Bill 407, changes to the Local Election Act. That statute needed some cleanup even from what was done on it last year. We were able to do that. The short-term occupancy rental tax passed the legislature. As a matter of fact, it is one of the few bills that that I'm going to speak about today that has already been signed by the governor. Most have not. Of course, she still has until 5th to act. We passed the airport landing fees bill. We passed a bill that will provide some new opportunities to our finance department of how they can make investments. One bill that we were not successful, we worked awfully hard on it, was the Community Solar Act. That got close to the finish line, but eventually with the Energy Transition Act and some of all the other initiatives taking place, the legislature just didn't have the in the end to pass that piece of legislation. Lots of other indirect pieces of legislation that we worked on that were beneficial for the city of Santa Fe. I'll mention one, the film credits. That was important to the city. That passed. Many others, firearms, medical cannabis, things like that. One bill that did not pass, it was the recreational marijuana bill. From a capital outlay perspective, that was just statutory. We had a number of different successes. We landed $9 million for the airport, $1.1 million for the Southside Teen Center, over $900,000 for solar facilities, over $1 million in district priorities and projects, including $550,000 for public restrooms on the plaza. Programmatic money that we weren't the direct lead on, but was in the resolution, and we were very supportive and helpful on. Some $500,000 for the LEAD program, $100,000 for the New Mexico Homegrown Products program that we've been involved in for time, and I remain involved in. Councilor Villarreal will be on that, help along the way. To boot, we just had a meeting, a very successful meeting at 2 p.m. this afternoon with the New Mexico Department of Transportation. And there is some $10 to $20 million of dollars that went to the New Mexico Department of Transportation in road funding that Santa Fe will participate in. And there may be even more opportunity to participate in even more road funding, discretionary amount of money that was provided to transportation. And so I think this legislative session was characterized as one where there was going to be a lot of money available. They just don't hand it out to you. You have to work hard for it. I think we worked hard for it, and we're very successful at getting our fair share and probably more than our fair share. That's really my report, Mr. Mayor and councilors, other than to say that there's a lot of thank yous to go around and fair to thank a lot of people. Your staff did a really good job. Your city manager managed things really well. You know, I have to coordinate. In your report, you'll take a look. It's probably some 40 bills that became priority bills. The fact is we tracked over 160 bills that directly related to the city of Santa Fe. You had many staff members that participated in testimony, participated in analyses. A special thanks to Regina Wheeler. She seems to keep lobbyist hours. She was always available and very, very helpful. To the council, beginning with, I think I worked with each one of you at one point or another, always very supportive, always have great ideas. You began the whole process by revamping the entire resolution by which we operate. And that was very, very helpful. So thank you to the councilors. You just did an amazing job. I want to personally thank you. You mostly committed energy. Is really helpful. Thank you, Mayor. And let's face it, we just have an incredible Santa Fe legislative delegation. Speaker Egoff, Leader Worth, Representatives Linda Trujillo, Jim Trujillo, Representative Chandler, Senators Rodriguez, Stefanix. They're just excellent, so supportive of the city of Santa Fe. Really deserve most of the credit for any success we had. So with that, Mayor, councilors, that's my report. I'll stand for any questions. Thank you, Mark.
I think we should recognize just how hard you worked and what an amazing job you did in the Roundhouse. I think it was an all-time record of bills that were considered and passed, and you were on duty all the time, guiding the and working with our delegation. I go back to that first breakfast where we were all together, and what a really remarkable sense of solidarity and joint purpose, shared intent to make this a very productive session. And so thanks to you, I think the city really came away with legislative wins, a number of wins in the capital outlay department that we can now to rebuild a lot of things that have been deferred maintenance for too long. So, is there a question? Councilor Lindell.
Well, I don't really have a question. I just want to thank Mark. I remember when I first came here a few years ago, and we approved Mark's contract, and I thought, wow, that's quite a lot of money. And you work so hard for that money, Mark. I never go over there, but when I see you, I ask you a question. You have an answer, or someone from your staff gets me an answer. With Regina, we were back and forth with different things of what time's that committee going to start. I don't know how you keep track of it all. And what a skill set it takes to balance all those relationships. It's really off to you. You do a terrific job for us, and I think that this year was a particularly successful year. So thank you very, very much.
Other questions or comments? I would add one other thing, Mark, before you leave, which is, as you well know, it's not over. The session's over, but the work of the legislature, our work with this new administration, as you mentioned, the meeting we had with the new Secretary of Transportation today, demonstrates that there's a new sense of collaboration coming out of the state government. People want to sit down with the city and work with us on priorities that we identify. And that is a lot of your work to make sure those relationships are solid and productive. So thanks for go too far. There's more to be done.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. Item number 13.
Yes, Mayor, Governor, members of the governing body. This is an item we voted on, the council voted on last meeting. After we circulated for signature, the Department of Transportation realized they wanted 2 sections to read city that had previously read county. These aren't particularly problematic. They were fine to be read county from the city's perspective previously, but I recommend passing.
So we're cleaning up some language.
That's right.
Okay.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay. Could you please call the roll?
Councilor Vihel-Coppler?
Yes.
Councilor Villarreal?
Yes.
Data?
Yes.
Councilor Harris? Councilor Ives?
Yes.
Councilor Lindell? Councilor Rivera?
Yes.
Councilor Romero Worth? Mayor Weber?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion is approved.
Thank you. We move to item 14 on our agenda, which is our city manager. Do you have any matters?
Mayor and councilors, I'll just say that our staff has been madly working on the budget to have it prepared as early as possible so that we can submit it to you all in advance of the hearings to get a little time to chew on. I'm still not sure what that release is going to be, but we're really trying to get it out as early as possible. So that's it for me, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. City Attorney.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I had the opportunity to speak with the Public Works Committee a little about, and I had some follow-up, and I wanted to give the benefit to the other members of the council of some of that information. So, and this is in relation to confidentiality of proposals with requests for proposals. But I wanted to start with just a couple of background notes. So some information that's important to be aware of is often we talk about bids. Technically, bids are in response to invitation. And the way that we procure with invitations to bid is a very different process than how we procure with requests for proposals. So just to use the terminology, when we talk about bids, it should be in response to an invitation to bid. And the way that invitations to bid are used is generally for a service or a good that we can describe with such particularity that the only factor that will matter once we get responses to that request or that invitation is the price. Because we're able to say we want something so specifically that we don't have to look at quality, we don't have to necessarily look at reputation. We can say we want something that weighs a certain amount, performs a certain way, and all bids that can offer that qualifying criteria would be eligible. In contrast with that, a request for proposals emphasizes quality, experience, expertise, and things of that nature. And for that reason, those factors are weighted more greatly than price typically. And they often include some creativity in the proposals. So people put forth a lot of potentially work on a proposal. So when groups review a request for proposal, it's often made up of subject matter experts who are able to evaluate that type of information in a specialized way. It is very important in a request for proposal that the criteria are listed expressly and that the matter of evaluating those proposals is listed expressly, such that all the vendors that are participating will know how they will be judged. And so that's something that actually the city of Santa Fe has the unfortunate distinction of having one of the few published procurement cases in New Mexico, and we lost, and that was in 1994. And the reason for losing, and we became liable for certain damages, was because we added criteria after the original request for proposals was issued, and we added actually a local criteria, which hadn't been in the request for proposals. Later on, we added local criteria. Now we have that, and we can provide local vendors that preference. But at the time, we hadn't included that type of criteria, but we applied it when we awarded the request for proposals to a particular vendor. Basically re-ranked the proposals based on that local criteria. Even though we canceled that RFP and went out again, we had still lost the case and had to pay damages for the time that that bidder or that proposer, that offerer, I have to catch myself as well, had put into that proposal. So that's actually a case that was pointed to the state because it's one of the few cases interpreting how RFPs work in New Mexico. So that brings us to my recent recommendation about going into executive session when when the council wishes to discuss proposals. Current code, and that is certainly not something that is required to be in place. So it's something we can consider. It's something that can be changed. This is just a recommendation under our current code. However, I have had some time to look into what the potential justifications for our current system might be, and I just wanted to raise some of those justifications for your consideration. And just to clarify, the confidentiality is not about the request for proposals itself. That's a public document, which we can talk about and share that with the public. We can even have staff speak directly to the basis for scoring, and each of those criteria were developed for a particular project. All of that is public, both before, during, and after the negotiation process. We can disclose the name of the recommended vendor and an up to amount that will be on the agenda, which is how the amounts were characterized in today's agenda, because we do have to give reasonable notice to the public about what you're potentially voting on, and so that's what the purpose of that is. We can also give the names of the vendors, the number of competing proposals, and after a final award, after the vote of the council, everything becomes public, unless it's something like bank information that's protected elsewhere in statute, or trade secrets. And that's, I actually talked to the Public Employees Retirement Association to see how they implement these features of the procurement code. And that's exactly how they do it, is they have the proposal that's public. They have a confidential portal for their members to sign into to see the proposals. And after the award is made, those proposals become public, except for certain trade information, because they have like financial vendors who have some confidential strategy information that actually rises to the level of a trade secret. We don't often have that information in our proposals. I think it would be very rare that something like that would be there. It's possible. So what is confidential is the information in the proposals, and only to the point of a final vote. So that would be specific ideas that were proposed, specific persons that were proposed to work on a project. So going into some of the possible policies that the council might want to consider when looking at this and whether to change it, is that if an award is ever canceled, the way the procurement code reads currently is that all information remains confidential forever, and that allows a new RFP to be issued, and if those vendors decide not to compete in that new RFP, their proposal does not become public. If that weren't the case, then other vendors would have the opportunity to see the proposals in the initial round, and vendors may feel that they don't have a fair opportunity after other vendors have already seen their proposals. So that's one risk. Another risk is that vendors could claim that the cancellation is due to some sort of public pressure or due to some other additional factor that's discussed during a council meeting. If there was something that was considered that wasn't in the original criteria. So that's another risk. If the RFP is awarded, there's some of the risks of not maintaining confidentiality is some of the same things, is that those who are not awarded could argue that some sort of public pressure was applied based on what was in the contents of the proposals themselves. There are risks, but there are also considerations to look at whether or not where and when we want to keep things confidential. So the council's role when you are reviewing these types of procurements is primarily to approve or deny an expenditure. But also, if you do see some sort of mistake made in an RFP, that is an opportunity for the staff to correct a mistake, and that would be a reason to deny a proposed expenditure as well. But what we wouldn't be able to do, unless there was actually an addition error in our calculations or misapplied factors, we would not be able to substitute a different vendor for the recommended vendor unless there had been a mistake. So hopefully I'll be able to answer questions tonight or in the future as well.
And I assume that the document you're working from is something that you can share with in some form after you've done whatever you want to do to clean it up.
Sure.
So that we can have the benefit of reading our way through it.
Sure, I could do that.
It's hard to absorb
a lot of information
on the fly. It's a lot of information. But if there are questions now, Councilor Ives.
just one. You mentioned a process whereby using this system for requests for proposal, there is a portal through which one would have access to documents in order to fully evaluate. Is that what we are moving toward at the city? And if so, when will that be in place?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Ives, that's an option. At this point, I was just looking. I think the way that we initially were going to address this was to provide a separate packet of any confidential materials and then put as much as possible in the public packet and then have the departments be able to describe with as much specificity as possible what the proposal was about, what the criteria were, how they selected, but not necessarily who was selected and what the proposal was. So a portal would be one option. A packet is another. So PARA has what they term a public packet that is posted online, and then they have other materials available via portal. But that is not, we don't have to follow a certain strategy for that.
Questions? Yeah.
Aaron, you mentioned something about the competing proposals, and I think one of the questions at Finance and PUC was see what the actual amounts were and how they scored each of those amounts. Is that something that can be part of any kind of document, I guess, private or public?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Rivera, yes, it could be part of the proposal until there was final action. So it would be confidential, but it is something that could be provided.
And that's something that would have to be discussed in executive session?
Yes.
And then is there a way to protect the staff that have scored an RFP? So my concern is that staff members who score a number of respondents then have to go back and work with those respondents later or some other time or on another bid process, and knowing who scored who in what way I see as problematic.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Rivera, if that information didn't appear on any sort of record, I suppose it's possible. There's not a specific confidentiality for that information right now. There's not a specific protection in place other than those scores would be confidential during the pendency of final approval. But afterwards, they would not be on records that we retain. So if it's a record that we create and it's a record we retain, I don't know of a particular confidentiality provision for that.
And then one of the items that we approved tonight was an award for bid, which I don't think met the criteria that you described. Had many vendors. It wasn't the lowest bid. Neither one was the lowest bid.
All right. So Mr. Mayor, Councilor Rivera, so the lowest bid is for invitations to bid. Was the one you're describing? It was a request for proposals, right?
It says approval of award of bid.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Rivera, I think the word bid is often used in ways that don't help to distinguish these two types of procurement. And that's why I'm trying to start that conversation. I think I also sometimes use the word bid, but I believe this was a request for proposals.
So it was in the title incorrectly?
Which number are we referring to?
This is item 11.
Yes. Yes. So I think the appropriate term would be offer, but I mean, so I think parlance, they're probably interchangeable. I was speaking in terms of the actual statutory language. So I do think this still puts the public on notice of what you're doing, which is the main intent of the agenda title.
Okay. And then what about decisions that have already been made where we haven't exactly followed this process? Or I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Rivera, I'm not sure that's probably a good idea necessarily. We think did the best we could at that time, given the knowledge we had then.
That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Vigil-Koppler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So
Madam Attorney and Mr. City Manager, do you envision a little training of some sort with staff to get the nomenclature right, to get the semantics right, so that in the future these items will be placed on the agenda? Because if we can't even figure out a bid and a proposal and an offer, I mean, I'm sure we could, but we don't prepare the agenda. So how will staff know what to put on the agenda, and will they even know the difference?
So, Mr. Mayor, Councilor Vihel-Koppler, I'm less worried about how the agenda is titled, and I'm more making a recommendation about process.
Sure, but I'm worried about the agenda and how it's titled. I like things to be nice and neat and understandable. Okay. And if we can make that the public, maybe we'll catch on to what is accurate and correct and for public and not for public.
Okay. And Mr. Mayor, Councilor Vihel-Koppler, so the stage we're at right now is revising the procurement manual, and the idea is definitely to do a lot of training, which would include this type of thing. But I just want to make clear that the agenda is not the bigger legal issue, but I certainly understand your point.
Well, good, because that's why I made it. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. I have one clarification. The items that council as offers, process that you're describing, what are the parameters of the governing body's decisions? Are we asked to evaluate the evaluation? Are we being asked simply to vote on the offer that is in front of us, up or down? What I think, again, as you talk, and Koppler is right about clarification and accuracy of the, not just the title, but the nature of the agenda item. So if I understand what you were briefing us, you were saying there is an RFP. The RFP goes out, the responses come in. Those are proprietary. The answers are they're somewhat proprietary. You don't want information to become that's competitive in nature to leach out into the public. We have a group of experts who evaluate the RFP, then present a recommendation to ultimately to the governing body. When that happens, what is our range of action?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the only two vote options really are to approve or not approve. What the vote could be based on could be you don't want to make the expenditure, you don't think that the project is something the city is prioritizing right now. It could be if there's a mistake in the evaluation somehow. But it really can't be that we don't like the vendor or that we think one of the other vendors is better based on our own experience. There's actually probably infinite numbers of reasons that we probably can't make the evaluation based on. And really, so the governing body isn't being asked to make an evaluation so much as it is being, at least not of the vendor themselves, more of the project that's being placed in front of the governing body.
Great. Well, I look forward to a chance to study more carefully in a written form, and maybe we could submit questions to you if there are things that are not yet clear in each of our own minds as to what the implications are. Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off, Councilor Romero.
You didn't cut me off, but just on your point, aren't we, in a sense, kind of the overseers? We're holding the process accountable, so that we want clear criteria and make sure that the staff in making the recommendation has processed correctly and use the criteria correctly in making the award. I mean, it seems to me that's our role.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Romero-Worth, I think that is part of it. So if there was a mistake made, and that could include like the wrong criteria being used for some reason, that could be a reason to deny the award. and staff would have to either reissue an RFP or not pursue that project.
And you say part of it. What's the part I'm missing?
Oh, so part of it is expenditure.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And the contract, the terms of the contract.
Yeah, but it seems like, that's the ultimate thing we do, but on what basis are we saying yes or no to that expenditure? Are we making sure that a proper process was followed, proper criteria were applied, and therefore we know we've done everything by the book, and that this award of money should be made?
So, Mr. Mayor, Council, I agree.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, it's my understanding if we went back to the city's own procurement process, that this would still be a factor that we'd have to deal with.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Rivera, it just depends on what you put into ordinance. So not everyone has the same process. We have adopted the state's process, which is the same as this. And we deviated from the state's process in a few ways in our procurement code, in that we added a couple exceptions. We added a reference that's specific to Santa Fe. There's nothing saying we have to follow the state's procurement code, but right now we have adopted it.
Very good. Thank you.
And on that point, sorry to belabor this, isn't but there, I think you tried to outline for us, and maybe this would be helpful to see something written, that there are real reasons why things have to be, or could be, or should be held confidentially until the bid is, or the RFP is awarded.
Mr. Mayor and Councilor Romero-Worth, I think that's right. There are policy reasons, but there you can weigh the policy reasons in different ways and determine what they are.
And I would think, might be that you have, maybe you don't have vendors or contractors who are interested in doing business with the city if they're the way they do business is exposed prior to an award being granted, that it could actually hurt us in that sense.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Romero-Worth, I think that's terrible.
Okay, just trying to understand all this. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think we'll go back through this maybe at our own pace with a piece of writing in front of us, and we can submit some written questions and continue to develop the response that meets the test of confidentiality, but also gets the governing body the information they need when there is a response to an RFP that is in front of the governing body. Okay, are there matters from the city clerk that we need to know about?
I have none, thank you.
Thank you, city clerk. Matters from the governing body. Councilor Vigil-Koppler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question on maybe procedure or trying to understand something. And that is, when we go through the packets and we have the charts that detail our votes in committee, I see a big distinction, and I'm wondering how I can get on the good list like Councilor Lindell. When I go through these charts, I see excused, I see absent, I see blank. And so I don't know what that means. Now, I'm absent. As soon as I know, I contact the chair, and I usually reasons, and they're like, yeah, great. I see a blank beside my name, and it looks like I blew it off. And I don't want to come across like I blow off committee meetings, but so I'm not sure how it works.
That the ones that say unexcused. Or
really? I've never seen that.
I think I've seen that, but because I think I had one when I was first elected. There was something, and I thought, wait, I told them that I wasn't going to be there.
Right.
So why is it that way?
Is there a rhyme or reason that we can follow?
We will explore the answer with the city clerk and get you on the right side of whatever the side is.
Well, until then, I would like my name marked safe and
good enough.
from a committee meeting. Thank you.
Duly noted, Counselor.
I'm sorry, which committee was that?
Do I have?
You can do it.
It's all of them. It's like I know.
You should just
going through here.
Just show her some examples that we can clean it up.
Thank you.
And just on that point, I would note the counselor is always very diligent in notifying me as well as the Director of Public Works of if she is unable to make a meeting. And my recollection is we always indicate that you are excused. I don't know how it gets captured, but I think that is that's the audible at the meeting.
We'll work on that one. Councilor Abeyta.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, for the, I guess it'd be the city manager. We worked out agreement with Santa Fe County, both our fire departments, regarding the issuance of building permits in one of the annex areas, Nelson Road, and I think we're at the point now where it's pending your signature. So I just wanted to bring it to your attention because we do have residents that are waiting to. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
All I have.
Councilor Rivera.
Just one thing in response to Councilor Vihel-Koppler, I think it's important for as well that if you aren't present for the consent vote, once that's taken, approval of the consent that was approved by the members that were there, it showed you didn't vote for those. That may be something else, Councilor. Not, and I agree with Councilor Ives that you do let me know when you're going to say use the absence, and we'll have to pay better attention to how it gets put into the coming agenda or the council agenda. Lastly, Mayor, I just wanted to. My father passed away. My father's birthday was on March 29th, and he passed away. And then the following March 29th, my granddaughter was born. So I had to wish her a happy birthday, and then also my wife on April 3rd and my sister on April 5th. So I wish them all happy birthday as well.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Villarreal.
His family has a lot of birthdays. All the time. Every single time we have a meeting. I love it.
Seems at least once a year.
Or twice. I don't have anything, actually.
Okay. Start down at the other end. Councilor Romero-Worth.
Thank you, Mayor. Just introducing an ordinance amending Section 25.4.3 of our code, the Commercial Water Users Rebate Program, to expand eligibility to commercial water users utilizing shared water meters.
Thank you. Councilor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to take a few minutes and update my colleagues and yourself on what's going on with at the airport. You remember that we passed a vision statement on the airport perhaps 2 years ago. We started developing a strategic plan. We're not there yet, but we've got another good committee working on a strategic plan for the airport. I want to thank Mike Prinz from the City Attorney's Office. He's been very helpful at a number of issues out at the airport. And so we've got a draft of our minimum standards. Those are advisory with the FAA, but very important to have on the record. Had not been touched since 1984, I believe. We're also responding to our airport security program and developing rules and regulations. That's a difficult discussion because, quite frankly, it involves inherently some tension between our kind of our commercial aviation. They have no real issues with the rules and regulations because it's airside. It's a bit more problematic for general aviation, but we're working through that. And then lastly, a draft from our partners, the Northern New Mexico Air Alliance, which looks at the kind of the analysis based on a survey on a route development study. So as soon as finalized, I'll get that circulated to all members of the governing body. But things are happening.
Great, Councilor. Thank you. Councilor I.
Nothing to add.
Councilor Lindell.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just my invitation for a house for cake.
Any time in the next 3 weeks, Councilor?
I think vacations. multiple. I have a couple items. First, we are rapidly approaching the Mayor's Give Back Ball coming up Saturday night. I know Councilor Harris will not be able to attend, but he will be there in spirit, and all the others will be there. Each of you will be enjoying the hospitality of a table that desperately wants to be with you, which is exciting. We are going to be honoring 27 nonprofits, 260 volunteers, and there will be 695 people in attendance in total at the Give Back Ball. The MC is Jill Cooper-Udall, which is she is just a delight and a tremendous presence, and so grateful to her for being there. And bring your dancing shoes for those of you who are Pink Flamingo fans. A chance to celebrate the people who give so much to our city. We're going to give back a thank you to them. So glad everybody most everybody will be there. Missed, but we understand. So that's item number one. Item number two, you will or have already received in your inbox an email that I want to go through now from right here and put it into the public record. I think it's safe to say that the topic that is foremost in the minds of Santa Feans today is potholes. We get a lot of calls about potholes. We get a lot of emails about potholes. We get a lot of newspaper comments about potholes. We even get cartoons about potholes. And the response to the pothole epidemic is, we hear you. Why are we having so many potholes? Well, the issue of deferred maintenance. For too long, we've let our roads and streets get to the point where they are easily disrupted by the wet weather. Turns out the data, for those of you who are data freaks, this year we dispatched our snow plows 32 times so far. Last year, 3 times. So we have had a significantly different weather experience this winter, and part of that amounts to the pothole eruption that we're dealing with. What I want to alert everyone to is that in the next 4 weeks, we will be hitting the pothole list as hard and fast as we can, and weather permitting, we'll be able to tackle the majority of the potholes that we already know about in the next few weeks. We've identified and moved $86,000 to fund overtime to fill potholes and to hire contractors to mill and overlay small sections of roads with multiple potholes. Crews started working 10-hour days, Monday through Friday. It means 2 extra hours per day for the next 4 weeks to fill holes around. We had our city crews looking into working on weekends as well. Turns out that the hot mix plant isn't open on weekends, so instead of going into the Saturday extra hours, they tacked on 2 hours at the end of each day. Who will be doing work on behalf of the city will come on board the week of April 1st and April 8th. It's going to take them a little bit of time to gear up and be ready to go to work while they move equipment into place. As of March 24th, there were 76 potholes on our list. We are filling about 10 a day, but every grows as we get more potholes reported, which is good. We want to do it all now while we've got the resources allocated and the crews ready to go to work. If there is any doubt, the crews have been alerted to and are scanning the area as they go to a pothole site, see if there are any others in close proximity so that they can take on the ones that have been reported, but also in the neighborhood attack additional potholes and not have to go back out. The average amount of time to fill a pothole using hot mix fix is about 45 minutes. So if you do the math of how many potholes we already know about, how many the crew we've got, the hours they're working, I think the the data to say that we can fill the bulk of these potholes in the next month, depending on what else we learn about or new reports. A little more background. Over the winter months, we used a cold mix fill because of the weather. They only lasted a few days. Last month, we filled 196 potholes with cold mix. Now that the weather is warmed up, the hot mix plant is open, and we're moving to the hot mix fix, which is more permanent but takes a little longer. If anybody is watching or listening or taking notes and you have a favorite or least favorite pothole you would like to report, the number is 505-955-6949, and we will take your request for a pothole fill. Wait there, because we know that potholes are a result of streets suffering from deferred maintenance. We are kicking the paving program into high gear, deploying $6.5 million of gas tax bond dollars over the next few months. There's a schedule of the work, some of which has already started, and will run now till the end of July. That schedule, there's a map, there's a full list on the website so people can see where we'll be working, where we are working right now. It includes concrete work, in some cases followed up by paving. And then, because we've been squeezing more money, thanks to the Public Works team, out of the jobs that have been done, it looks like we'll be able to get more miles out of the bond money, and that'll the savings go back into more road. And then, of course, we heard from Mark about the NMDOT dollars that will be allocated to pave roads in the city. So the headline is, when it comes to potholes, we hear you, we're on it. Thanks to the pothole crew, Jody, Marcos, and Daniel. And in addition to pothole work, we have 3 graders working on roads, a four-man concrete crew working on curb and gutter repairs, and 4 sweepers getting the salt off the roads and making sure cyclists are not victims of stuff flowing over into the bike lanes. So a pretty comprehensive report, thanks to the Works team, our finance team, our constituent services team. Potholes are very much top of mind, and we're going to get to the bottom of them. Yes, Councilor Rivera.
If I could make a request to Christine on the pothole issues, I had reported on Henry Lynch in Agua Fria and was told by the city that it's a county road. The constituent called the county said it's a city road, so we're running into that situation. So I hope we can remedy it, and regardless of how it gets fixed, I hope it just gets dealt with.
No, I appreciate it. And I think the extra resources and the allocation of the extra time is going to very quickly demonstrate that we are responding to what is a really deep felt problem. Yes, Councilor Vihel-Koppler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to point out that I know we are already experiencing risk management claims because people are damaging their tires.
Yes, of how we're prioritizing the potholes that get filled.
Got to keep an eye on that risk management fund, though. Thank you.
Very good. Any other? Yes, Councilor Harris.
Yeah, I think this is great. It's something that is clear, and I think there's confidence that it'll be implemented appropriately. Is the list public so that if people can look at the list and say, oh, the one that I see on my street is on the list, I don't have to report it. But is that information public? So
it's not at the moment. We can certainly work with constituent and council service and public works to make that list something where people can see, did my report make the list? Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea.
That would add to the sense that that something got called in, got added to the list.
And just in the spirit of knowing that the city's work is never done, now that we've got a good plan to address potholes, we're going to need a sound plan to address medians.
And we are on that as well, and in fact, we're ahead of schedule for getting the work and the crews and the effort put together.
Great.
On medians, on weeds, and many of these really consistent and ongoing requirements
exactly.
that make up the way the city looks.
Right, and that's what our constituents see and live with every day, and should draw their attention towards us. So that's great, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other business? If not, we will come back at 7 o'clock and resume for a break. Thank you. Madam Clerk, you think with our quorum we should begin business here, even if we're short a couple of significant members?
Yes,
Let us begin.
Mayor Weber.
Present.
Councilor Baca.
Here.
Harris. Councilor Ives. Councilor Lindell. Councilor Rivera.
Here.
Councilor Romero Worth. Councilor Vigil Coppler.
Here.
Councilor Villarreal.
Here, present.
Do you have a quorum present, Mayor?
Okay, we are two lost little lambs who are probably coming back from eating, but I'm sure they'll be here shortly. All right. Let us begin with our floor, and we will have anyone who wishes to address the governing body, please come to the and we'll give a 2-minute opportunity.
Sir.
Stephanie Beninato. I'm here again to talk a little bit about recreation, but more importantly about HR. And there was an article in the paper today, of course, about the assistant HR, now deputy HR director. And I asked about the project manager in HR, the newly hired one at 90,000, which is interesting since the assistant HR director only gets 92 now. But more importantly, I wondered what kinds of projects an HR project manager has. And the only project this manager has is one that started in 2015 to reclassify employee positions. And technically, according to the RFP, it ended a year ago in April 2018. So I really do wonder what we're paying this person $98,000 for. In addition, some of what that person's duties are already being done by something called an advisory council. That is, I think, recommending IT improvements or something like that. And so again, we're just seemingly adding yet another layer of bureaucracy to whatever is going on in HR and in terms of the city classification system as well, or IT projects. In terms of recreation, you know, I'm sure Mayor might have saw the letter yesterday that Fort Marcy has been pretty much of a disaster. And although people think of it as two cities and somehow the south side being the neglected one, in fact, Fort Marcy and Salvador Perez are the huerfanos here. And really, I mean, we got showers at Fort Marcy. They had really good showers at Chavez that are single stall that goes on and off by itself. You don't have to even remember, and you can control the heat. What we got was one column with 3 heads on it, in which it doesn't seem to matter whether you have it on low or high, you're going to get whatever heat decides to come out of the pipe. So again, to me, the whole project, there's so many things wrong. I think I wrote to you all about some of the things I saw that was wrong. It was really bad, and it was really distressing that the project manager would not listen to staff, because the walls were open and staff was saying we need more outlets. And certainly I don't really think in a locker room you need a mirror necessarily, but what you do need is a mirror that has a shelf and some outlets so you can put something on the shelf while you're looking in the mirror, I don't know, trying to shave, trying to pin up your hair, or whatever it is that you're doing. So again, there was just some really basic design features that didn't happen. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to be heard on the petitions from the floor? Okay, seeing no one else, we will, there are no appointments, City Clerk?
No appointments.
No appointments. Thank you, ma'am. We begin then with item H, public hearings. Who are we looking at? Who's going to talk to us about this? Would you like to bring us through this? Thank you. Yeah, I think this has your name on it, Councilor Vigil Coppler.
This is pretty straightforward. As you know, the city sometimes disallows large trucks in neighborhood streets, and from Cerrillos Road entering into Camino Carlos Rey,
the large truck prohibition is too far into Carlos Rey for a big truck to turn around. We just proposed to move this sign closer to Sirius Road. A big truck sign that he or she cannot drive down that street where they can turn around.
Terrific. That's a great explanation. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to be heard on this matter? Okay, in that case, we will close the hearing part. Is there discussion among the council?
I wanted to make a motion, Mayor.
Okay, Councilor Rendell.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, could you please call the roll?
Councillor Villarreal?
Yes.
Councillor Beta?
Yes.
Councillor Harris?
Yes.
Councillor Ives?
Yes.
Councillor Rendell?
Yes.
Councillor Rivera?
Yes.
Councillor Romero Worth? Councillor Helicopter?
Yes.
Mayor Weber?
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Good. Thank you. Item number 2 on our public hearing agenda is an appeal of Historic District Review Board decision. And before we get to the matter, I want to review again the process of our appeals, noting that in these we adopt our robes and behavior as a quasi-judicial body, which means we are governed by a set of rules and practices that are not the same considerations where we're bringing in views, testimony about people's lives. We're really focusing on the facts at hand. I think last time we did this, Councilor Romero worked a good, quick reminder. Maybe you can do that again right now before I walk through the process, because I thought you summarized it very well.
Well, actually, I would have the city, and you can put me on the spot and I can paraphrase.
So Mayor Weber, members of the council, I think Sally is also prepared to include this in her opening statements, but you are serving in a quasi-judicial stance here, which is different than a policy-making stance. In other words, we have to apply the law that we have to the facts that are presented today. We can't come up with a policy we wish we had, at least not today. That could be something for the future. But we have to apply the factors that we have in front of us and the legal guidance that we have in front of us to the facts presented that are relevant to this provision.
How'd she do?
She's getting so succinct. There's no way to even make it more succinct.
All right. I want to walk through very quickly the process in case it's the first time for anybody to attend one of these. We'll start with a disclosure by the governing body of any communications that might in any way be prejudicial, acknowledging contacts and other ways in which people might have reached out to us. The hearing will begin with a staff report from city attorney and land use staff, maximum of 10 minutes. Then we'll hear from the appellant, an opening statement, sworn witness testimony if so desired, up to 15 minutes. The appellant, if desired, may ask questions of staff. The public to testify. If members of the public wish to testify, you'll be sworn and you'll be given 2 minutes to make your comment. The governing body then may ask questions of any of the witnesses, of the appellant, anyone who has testified to facts in the case, again, must be, if they wish, can respond to the appellant and add some more context to the debate. At that point, the appellant will make a closing statement, and then at that point, I will close the public hearing. If the council members wish to have more testimony, open the public hearing. So I recommend that if you're trying to pursue a line of questioning, do it while the public hearing is open so we don't have to revisit that. Once the public hearing is closed, the governing body will go into deliberations, culminating with a motion, a second, and a vote and resolution. So if that's clear to everybody, Let me first ask the members of the governing body if anyone has received any communications or has been contacted in any way that needs to be disclosed at this time. Okay. Sally.
Thank you, Mayor Weber. Council. I'm here with the City Attorney's Office memo for this appeal hearing. As the City Attorney has already explained, this is a quasi-judicial proceeding. I think she covered it well. So, but as a reminder, your responsibility tonight is to decide this issue through the application of the code and information presented. And also just a reminder that you're reviewing the decision of the Historic Districts Review Board de novo, which means you'll be independently applying the law to the and you need not to their application. Turning to the substance, tonight the property owners are here challenging denial of a carport, which they propose to add to their home at 211. Understanding the issues in this case, I think, require a little bit of background about the property. So I'm going to provide just a quick overview of what I understand the background to be as set forth in the staff report that went to the board. The property is located in the downtown and Eastside Historic District, and it consists of a principal residence and a guest house at 211. The principal residence has been listed as a contributing structure to the downtown Eastside Historic District. It was originally built as a duplex, like a bilaterally symmetrical duplex, and it was addressed as 211 and 211 and a half. I think that was, by the 20s that it was in place. And I'm not sure when the contributing status was given, but 3 sections of the south-facing facade were designated as the primary facade of the contributing structure, and that's where the entrance into the home is. So it was sort of the front of the house and the portal that included the 2 doors into the 2 sides of the duplex. The house listed as non-contributing, and it didn't used to be the same sort of house. It was actually, it appears from the historic inventory that it was actually built as a garage for the neighboring 209. But by about the mid-50s or so, it was a standalone single-family residence. And at some point, guest house and the duplex came under the same ownership of the prior owners of the property. And I think in about sometime in 2015, those prior owners proposed to the Historic Districts Review Board to do a bunch of remodeling, or I don't know if it's a bunch, but some remodeling of the property. Let's see. Your packet, it's page 60, and it shows kind of what was approved in 2015. The 3 green lines show the 3 primary facade sections. You can see back in the northeast corner, there's an addition that was added to the principal residence. And then you can see all the way on the west side of the guest house, there's a new garage that was added. And then there was an addition of like a sort of a portal. I think it was like an open portal connecting the 2 structures and kind of connecting the portals from both, like with a hallway, like a breezeway, I think. They may be able to clarify that better, but it was all kind of consolidated into one sort of larger single-family residence in 2015. Let's see. And this, I'll just, while I'm on this page here, I've also got, this is the south elevation. You can see the primary facade there of the principal residence is the piece on the green line. You can see the facades 1, 2, and 3 that are primary. And then you can see the guest house just to the left. And then the bottom one where it says proposed south elevation, that's added in 2015. There's like that little addition that kind of connects them, little roof guy. And then there's the garage all the way on the west. 2018, the current owners of the submitted the application that resulted in this appeal tonight. Let's see. And the proposal consisted of 3 parts. They proposed to make a change to an existing non-historic portal, to change the garage door that had been put on the garage in 2015, and also to add a carport, which is proposed to be in front of the garage that was added in 2015. The historic preservation staff recommended approval of the entire application on the ground that it complied with the code, in their view. It went before the Historic Districts Review Board in January, and the board approved the changes to the portal and to the garage door, but they denied approval of the carport. The reason that the board gave for denying the carport was a concern that it would overwhelm the primary facade of a contributing structure. Just to give you an idea of where it's proposed to be added here, this is again the site plan from above. You can see those 3 primary facades in green, 1, 2, and 3. To the left, that was added in 2015, all the way to the west, and then the thing I've highlighted in yellow, I believe, is where the carport would be located. And I think the board's concern that it would overwhelm the primary facade, I believe, arose from the code provisions preclude an addition that would cause a contributing structure to lose its historic status, and the provisions that preclude alterations or additions to features that sort of embody the historic status of a contributing structure. Appellants appealed. Their argument is that there are some specific code provisions about where you can put attachments, specifically not on a primary facade, and you should, if possible, add it to the non-contributing portion of a structure if possible. In this case, they said, it's far from the primary facade. It's attached to the non-contributing part. And so that's pretty much the issue in a nutshell. But before I hand it over, let's see. Carl's correcting me, but I'm not sure where I misspoke, so it's hard to backpedal. I just wanted also to acknowledge that as part of your packet tonight, as a separate attachment, you did receive additional information submitted by the appellants. It's labeled as Appellants Exhibit 1. It's a legal-size artistic rendering. And I just wanted to point out that part of what's being depicted here is a carport that was recently approved at the neighboring property at 209 Delgado Street. I just wanted to acknowledge that there was a board approval of a carport next door. That was in February, just last month. And I want to point out that the property at 209 Delgado is a non-contributing structure. I think that is really the difference, why the board approved that one and was more concerned about the one at 211. And I did bring the findings of fact and conclusions of law 209 case. If you like, I can enter it into the record as Exhibit I. I did bring copies. So I just wanted to acknowledge that there was this case next door, that it was a non-contributing house next door. This does provide more description of what was proposed. I don't know if it's actually been constructed at this point or not. But the other thing I wanted to point out about the property next door is that the house was actually downgraded in status in 2013 because it no longer had enough significant historic integrity left to maintain the contributing status. And I kind of reflects the board's thinking in this case, and that is as you take a contributing structure and remodel and add on, over time it does sort of chip away at the features that give a structure its contributing status, and I think that was the board's intent here, was to really steer clear of. Let's see. In conclusion, consider if there is sufficient evidence to find that this proposed carport would overwhelm the primary facade at 211 Delgado. If you think there is to make that finding, I would ask you to also consider whether the board properly legally concluded that the carport should be denied under the code. And if you agree with both of those, then you should affirm the board and deny the appeal. Otherwise, I would recommend that you grant the appeal and reverse the board. And with that, I will hand it over to the appellant and the public, and then Carol and I will be available to answer questions.
Thank you very much. Now we hear from the appellant, up to 15 minutes. That camera is not nice to us at all. I assume you're trying to make a point by showing us that.
Good evening, Mayor's, and this is Colleen Gavin. We are with Jenkins Gavin here in Santa Fe, here this evening on behalf of the property owners, appealing the Historic Board's denial of a proposed carport at 211 Delgado Street. The address is 130 Grant Avenue, Suite 101. So we have a brief presentation just to walk you through some of the specifics. So I know that the council does not have the benefit of a site visit, as the board does, and so we have some images that I think would really help create some context for you about this particular property and its unique features. So what you see on the board here is this is the subject property at the back of town. So this is Delgado Street here. There's the river and Alameda, and then just off the page there to the bottom to the south is Canyon Road. So there's a that comes all the way down, and then this property is back in the corner of the compound. It's about 265 feet from Delgado Street. And then this is zooming in on the compound a little bit. Again, the driveway from Delgado Street. There's a residence here in the front. This is 209 Delgado that attorney referenced with respect to their recent approved carport that would be in this location. And this is the subject property here. So if you're standing on Delgado Street and looking down the driveway, this is the front property with a really wall here. Then you drive down, and this very significant large tree is in the front yard of the subject property. So the arrow is there just to kind of help you orient yourself, because you can't see anything from the street. And then as you approach the front of the property from Delgado Street, this is the existing garage, in front of which the carport is proposed. There's a small yard wall here. This is the portal that was referenced in 2018, and just beyond is that guest house building. And then over here is the main residence, also with a nice yard wall. And then another image here. This is the front of the main residence. This is really the view, the perspective that you would see, because you never really get a full front-on view of the property just because of the way it's oriented. And then this is the front portal area, and so this is these are the primary elevations. So when you're familiar with this, but in the historic district, when you have a design or significant, which means it has historic status, what staff does, and often the board is involved in determining what are the primary elevations. What are the elevations that have those kind of unique features that really make the house special and make it what it is? And so, so it is the south elevation of the interior to the portal, as well as the two elements that jut out. So if though there is another vacant lot directly across from this parcel. So again, there eventually, we believe, probably would be a home constructed there, but this is if you're looking straight on at the property. So it's really not a view anybody would ever have unless this could be somebody's living room looking across at some point in the future, I suppose. So again, there's the garage, there's the portal added in 2015, and then this is that primary here. And the portal that was added in 2015 was kind of a lost opportunity. I'm just going to go back here real quick. If you see, this is really a very sweet element and feature, is this beam and corbel detail here with this old wood at the portal. It really defines the house and the building. And so when they did the guest house, they just did a simple, like a 4x4 or a 6x6 beam. It was really just a lost opportunity to emulate and create connection to that really sweet portal element on the historic part of the house. So part of the application that went along with the carport was the application to rebuild that. The owners want to rebuild that because it was not executed properly. It was approved by the board. It was poorly executed, and we think really detracts. And so as part of the application was to rebuild that portal and have it emulate the existing historic portal. Again, there you can see it right there. How handy that was the next photo. So you can see that it kind of has a contemporary feel. It's just, again, it was really a lost opportunity to create some connection to the main residence. And then here's the garage. And I think, as the city attorney also mentioned, also the third part of our request back in January to the board was to replace these doors, which we also think were not as well executed as they could have been, staying with kind of the carriage door concept, which you do see a lot around the east side, but also looking to replace those as well. And so right now, if you're coming down the driveway, essentially facing due east, this is what you see. This is the neighboring property here at 209. This is their current parking space, and then you can see 211 right there. And so we, as the attorney also mentioned, we did learn that the neighboring property had a carport that was approved last month. So we thought in terms of context, it was good to look at the end result with our carport and the neighbor's carport. What's that going to look like? So we through a public records request, architectural drawings for the neighboring property so we can understand exactly what was proposed, and we had it professionally rendered to scale. So you can see the neighbor's carport here, our proposed carport. Again, this carport designed in a very modest fashion, but really emulating that really sweet wood detail in the historic portal, and then replacing the portal in front of the guest house with these same types of very traditional wood elements, again, to create that architectural connection. And then if you standing with your looking kind of more towards Delgado Street, this is the existing view. And then again, where the neighbors currently park their vehicle. And then that is what you would see once, if our carport is constructed and once the neighbor's carport is constructed. Like as you see, this is a very modest structure, and you can see what happens when we, I'm losing my mouse, there it is, when we out these timbers at the portal in front of the guest house. I mean, it just transforms the whole space. It's so much better. So Sally also walked through, and Colleen's going to go ahead and pass this out so you can see this, because there is a little bit of a history. As we know, these homes in our historic districts do evolve over time. And so what you see here in the blue is the original 1927, and you can see it's a classic duplex. A lot of structures like this built around Santa Fe during that time period. And then in 2000, and then here we have this little separate structure we think was originally a garage built, and then it became actually a residence in the mid-50s, and then later it was incorporated, but this was a completely separate address at a certain point. And so that was in the mid-50s, and then in 2015, there was an addition to the rear of the main residence, and then the little pink building that we show here was enlarged somewhat to make it more functional as a guest unit, and then a garage added. And then in yellow here, you can see the proposed carport. And then down here at the bottom, it just kind of relates. You can see the original in the blue over on the right, and then as it sort of gradually grew a little bit to the left. So it was in your staff memo. It pointed out code provisions that are applicable to this particular request. And Sally stated that 2 through 5 we have satisfied as the applicant. The code prohibits the alteration of architectural features and spaces that embody the contributing status. We're 65 feet away. The center line of this carport to the center line of that house is 65 feet away. So we are not altering anything on the contributing structure. The code prohibits an addition to a primary facade. We are not adding anything. We are not touching that historic residence. Additions are not permitted on the side of an existing footprint unless it's set back 10 feet. We are 65 feet away from it. In the edge of the carport to the edge, 35 feet. In the center line, it's 65. So we're nowhere near it. So we are in compliance with that. And then 5, attached to any existing non-contributing of structure instead of attaching them to the significant or contributing portion. Done. Absolutely what we're doing. So now we're back to number 1. Code prohibits any addition that would cause a contributing structure to lose its contributing status. During that hearing, not once did one board member express concern. Not one time did they express concern that this modest little carport is going to endanger the contributing status of this residence. Not one time. It was never said. So, here's an interesting thing. So as you know, I believe you're very aware of this, status is by the board. And sometimes with properties, we have to go in and if we have a client, maybe it was never surveyed, it has no status, we're going to do alterations. So we often have to go to the board and we have to ask for a status review. And sometimes if a property was, when it was originally surveyed, it wasn't old yet, so it was non-contributing. But today, it's all of a sudden 50 years old, it might be contributing. Because once something's 50 years old, it's eligible for contributing status. So in those situations, we go before the board, and we have a historian that's approved by the city of Santa Fe do an assessment, and they would make a recommendation. Either, yes, this property is deserving of contributing status, it is worthy of preservation, it should be preserved. And sometimes they come back and they say, no, there's really nothing here that really contributes to the character and the fabric of the downtown and East Side Historic District. So this is a very typical process. Done it a lot. Been doing it in front of the board for longer than I would care to admit. I can guarantee you, this carport was constructed, and I went to the board for a status review and said, I want to downgrade the building. There's not a chance they would downgrade the structure. Not a chance. We have had structures with much more significant alterations that were not well executed as what we are proposing here. It's very sensitively executed and 65 feet away from the historic house. They are very reluctant, rightly so, to downgrade structures haphazardly. Like, you've got to make a case that something is not deserving of status or is no longer deserving of status. If I had a client come to me and say, hey, take this and go get it done, I'd be like, no way. I would not even let them hire me to do that because it is dead on arrival. So we are 100% compliant with every single applicable code section. Every single one. Time during that hearing did a board member say they're concerned about the status of this structure? There's no there. So with that, I greatly appreciate your attention, and we would to stand for any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You actually get to ask questions of the staff if you want. That's the step in this process.
Thank you, Mayor. Staff recommended approval, so I'm in completely agreement with Historic Preservation staff, so I have no questions.
Very good. We'll move right along. Moment where the public can be sworn and comment, offer a 2-minute comment on this case. If there's someone from the public who wishes to be heard, please, you need to be sworn in. I think we might be able to do a mass swearing in, can't we? A lot of swearing, a lot of in.
I'll swear in everyone that's going to speak. You'd all please raise your right hand. Under penalty of perjury, do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
So whoever wishes to go first, please come forward and give us your name, and we'll give you a 2-minute, give us your point of case.
Bonifacio A. Armijo. Buenas noches de Dios, Mayor, Councilor. I'm a general contractor here in Santa Fe. I was hired by Jerry and Nina to oversee their project. When I was hired was the addition was kind of bland, as you can see on the 2015 approval. So the changes that were recommended is beefing up that portal with larger beams, corbels, posts, to be more Santa Fe-like. Also the carriage doors instead of these metal type doors that were pretty funky, to be honest. And also adding this. I sat on the for a couple of years. I was a little stunned vision based on that as Jennifer noted, they've met everything that's needed to be met. I just don't know why it would have been refused. So I would ask that the Councilor Mayor that you reverse this decision and move for approval of this case.
Good evening. I'm Jerry Meyer. I'm the property owner, along with my wife, Nina Zingale, and we're in the process of, we live here part-time, but we're in the process of making this our full-time home. We met in New Mexico and got married in Corrales 20 years ago, and we're, overwhelming goal, I think, is to be part of the neighborhood, and I think we're struck by the fact that there's a lot of former homes that are not residential anymore, and we can't do that, but we wouldn't plan to ever do that to the community. That what we do, all the changes that have been suggested here, enhance the neighborhood, enhance my neighbors' view of what they have to see right now, and to conform with the code. So I thank you, Your Honor, and council members for hearing this appeal, and respectfully hope that you go in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
My name's Edward Gonzalez. I live right next door, south of this property, 19 Delgado Street. Mr. Mayor and members of the council, the reason I'm here is in support of reversing the decision of the Historic Board. As you can see by the renderings and the other new addition that's going to be going on there, enhance the neighborhood, not take anything from it. And as a member that lives right next door, I have a double carport. So I'm completely in support of this. That carport that I'm speaking of has been there for 50 years. Thank you for your words.
Thank you.
My name is William Meyer. I live at 215 Delgado, which is about 100 feet away. Outside of the Gonzalez family, I'll probably be seeing the south facade more than any other person will. I was raised from birth in 211 in the building that we're talking about. And I really feel like all the work has been done to justify making this addition, and I can't see how the carport will overwhelm the historic character of the building. And I'd like to point out the common ground that I have with the historic board, and I appreciate the work that they do, because I have lived in this neighborhood all my life, and I will live in it for the rest of my life, and I think what they do is important. However, I think the historic value of our community is really valuable, and I think, like Jerry said, having a neighbor that contributes to this neighborhood and is so tasteful and changes that he makes is really a valuable historic contribution. So I think that it's a good to allow this project to happen.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, my name is Paul Chatty. I'm a friend of the appellate. I've known them for years. I'm a retired National Park Service. Has more than 30 years of historic preservation. You may not consider that a qualification, since it's the National Park Service. But I just wanted to point out that this is a very light, airy. It's not big, heavy things. Kind of takes over the landscape. I think it works rather well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Stephanie Benenato. Being a lawyer, I'm going to speak out of both sides of my mouth. I think you should probably read the findings of facts from 209 so that you can see what their thought process was like. Because I don't think that anybody else can assume what the board's thought process is or what they might do at some time in the future. Because they did downgrade the status of 209 Delgado because it was overwhelmed by additions. And this happens a lot. Not only have I worked in historic preservation for a long time, but I also have observed the board for a long time, and I've observed the cases that come to the board. There are many cases where they have a structure, historic structure, and they keep coming back, well, we just want to do this little thing, then we just want to do this little thing, and soon really the whole house has been sort of surrounded by something different. In terms of the board's view, I know it's back from Delgado Street itself, but I think it does, it's what they call proud of the historic facade, in other words, in front of it. So as you come up the street, what you first see is the carport. You do not see the house. And given that they have a carport next door, which is actually much bigger, and kind of surprised that the board approved that, but it's a non-contributing structure, so they have a different standard for it. I think that's what determined the board's outcome here, because what you're seeing is a car culture coming up, and what you see first is car culture rather than the historic house. And I can't know what the board was thinking, but I think that could have been. I think the applicant has a good point. I mean, they are 65 feet away. I think that this structure is much more in keeping with the sort of ratio of the house than, say, even the next door carport. It's improvement on the doors, that for sure. And the new work on the portal will also, I think, add to it. So again, I think, as pointed out by the city attorney, it's a finding, and it's that number one finding. And again, you have to decide, is this house being overwhelmed or not by that carport? And, you know, it was a subjective finding by the board, and it's going to be a subjective finding by you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to be heard at this time? Okay, we have now an opportunity for members of the governing body to ask questions of either staff or the appellant or any of the sworn witnesses. Councilor Ives, you are looking very ready to ask questions.
I am curious on one point, and I'll ask staff this. On page 4 packet, which is page 4 of 7 in the staff memo, you run through a list of 5 different attributes under the code. And the 4th one in that list states, 4th, additions are not permitted to existing unless the addition is set back a minimum of 10 feet from the primary facade. And it seems that the interpretation of set back in this particular instance is set to the side of, as opposed to back from the plane of the principal facade, which is that south-facing facade. And that the demonstration which shows the carport, in fact, extending probably about 10 to 15 feet in front of the facade, even though it is set 35 feet to the side of the facade. Do you know of interpretations of that language set back that have been consistently applied? And I know you're new in the position, so I don't mean to put you on the spot, but would simply ask that broad to understand if there is any context that we have on how the words setback has been interpreted.
Thank you, Councilor Ives, for your question. I might ask Carol to back me up on this one, but I think my understanding of the interpretation of that is that because you do have sort of the broken massing on the side, so you get to the end of that number 1 facade and it does cut in, even though it comes back out. I think because you cut back, and I think I'm not sure if it's 10 feet without getting an architect with a drawing, but I think because you have the jog back before it then comes back out, that it satisfies that provision. That's my understanding of how it's being applied, but Carol may have a correction.
Thank you, Councilor Ives, member of the governing body. If you go to page 18 of the packet, there's a really clear site plan that provides the footprint of the existing contributor, the guest house, which is actually attached just by the portal, the new garage of the carport. And I think it actually is this drawing also, the schematic shows it. So while there's a connecting structure to the contributing building, the carport is actually being attached to a non-contributing element, and so that provision doesn't apply.
Well, I'm curious because at least our memo says it's satisfied as opposed to it does not apply. And why? So you're saying it shouldn't apply because
it's not being attached to the structure.
Yeah, I look at the language there, and it says additions are not permitted to the side of the existing footprint. And the language is interesting there. It doesn't refer specifically to the structure, but rather the footprint on the ground.
The footprint of the contributing structure is separate from the non-contributing building and where the carport is being attached. And again, that all 5 of those criterion apply contributing structures and their primary facades.
And it's interesting when I look at the first page of the Exhibit 1 that we had distributed tonight, and you look visually, and unfortunately the perspective is not defined, i.e. the point from which that view is taken, but nonetheless it seems to clearly show that the carport extends in front of the facade, which, of course, Delgado being the primary street that folks would be viewing this from, means that that carport will certainly cover that southern facade. And, I've struggled to understand what the historic board meant by overwhelmed. It's as close as we come to understanding what overwhelmed in this context means. Not totally clear they needed to go there, and that they couldn't have said, well, rather than being set back, this structure is actually out in front of the south-facing facade, which is the primary contributor in the instance. Just, again, struggling with language and interpretation in our code, because I think I understand what they were saying. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all I have.
Okay, Councilor. Any other questions from members of the governing body? Councilor Villarreal.
Just a quick clarification on this visual. So this addition here, I was assuming that the raised portion of is that. It doesn't really match when you look at the. It seems like it should be pushed over.
There's a portion of it that's lower.
Okay.
So it's not visible.
Okay. Yes. And so this space is a breezeway. There's no connection to the two.
Exactly. So when you look, thank you, Councilor Villarreal, Mayor, councilors. When you look at this separation here, these, like I said, these have always been separate structures. And so, just circling, so this is, the blue is the, it is not attached, except this portal created an opportunity to have a covered breezeway to get from the garage into the house. That's its only intent. But these are separate structures. And so if we were going to attach anything here to the blue, the 10-foot rule would absolutely apply. It only applies when you are attaching directly to the contributing structure. You can't attach, like you could never attach in the, that's a primary facade. So when you're attaching to the side, which is typically how it works, right? Enlarge the property. Here, they did it to the back, which is preferable, obviously, right? Originally in 2015. But if we were going to say this guest house wanted to be constructed here, and it was going to attach physically to the building, it would have to be. So we are attaching to an adjacent detached structure that is non-contributing, and therefore the 10-foot rule is not applicable.
Thank you. And the other question I had was, this carport's, I'm guessing, for the guest house. And where did the primary residence park?
For the primary residence. Yeah, I mean, the little unit here is just that. It's for when they happen to have guests. There's no tenant in the space. And so they are, as typical, a two-car family. And so they have the garage, and they would have the carport.
So that garage is actually used, I thought it was
it's used
art
both,
studio.
Depending on if they're both at the same time. Sometimes somebody would park outside in that space. It kind of serves double duty. It's a little oversized, so sometimes there's a car parked in it. Sometimes it does serve as an art studio space.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Any other? Yes, Councilor Rivera.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recently approved carport at 209. Can you just explain what that residence looks like? Is it a residence, or do they have some separations as well? And what kind of additions have they been allowed to do that contributed to the decision?
So it is a single family residence, and it has had a lot of alterations over the years, and so that's why it has a non-contributing status. And the carport attached, you see in this image, is proposed to be attached directly to the house, and it's a double carport.
And have all additions have been to the primary residence, and those have all been throughout the years?
Yeah, and I'm not expert on the history of that building, of that structure, but the good news is the recent modifications that were approved along with this carport, I think, are going to be very positive for that particular house in terms of returning it to a flat roof. Is that my recollection? I thought they were maybe removing some of the pitched elements. But generally, when we looked at the drawings, it looked all that it was moving in the right direction. It was all going to be good improvements to that building.
Based on this rendering, do you think that the new carport at 209 affects the view of the appellant's primary residence?
Do I think this affects the view of the contributing structure?
From Delgado.
I mean, it definitely is part of the view. I mean, it's not blocking the view, and frankly, neither is this. This is a porous structure. This is not solid wall. You can see right through it. This, as you can see right here, this is the primary facade. This is the view if you're in the driveway. This is what you see.
I'm going to know the dimensions of both.
So
carports.
Our carport is about 10.4 in terms of height. That carport is 13 feet and 2 inches. It's about 3 feet taller than ours, and it's twice as wide.
And both of them come out about the same length, is that correct?
Theirs extends further.
Further out?
It extends further out.
Okay.
And as you can see here, again, because of the way this house is oriented and how it relates to the driveway and how it relates to anything that could be defined as a public view, because of the perspective, you would have to build something in the middle of the driveway facade. There is nothing about that carport that blocks that primary facade. It just doesn't. And it's because of the perspective of the view as you approach the property.
And is the carport designed for the rental or for the primary residence?
No, it's for the residents. And there's no rental. They have a little guest unit, but they actually use for guests. Shocking.
Just wanted to make sure. I think that's all, Mayor.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Vihel-Koppler, Counselor Abeyta, questions? We got to get there. We get there soon. Any other questions before we? Yes, Counselor Ives.
Just two quick things. By the logic of the fact that this is attached to structures that have not been found to be contributing, presumably applying that rule, it would be fine the carport to this structure because it too is separated from the main house. But I cannot help but think that that is not a valid interpretation of that provision. So I don't think it's such a hard and fast rule as has been suggested that the mere fact that it is attached to those buildings that are to the side, the interpretation of that provision inapplicable to this matter. The other thing that is and of interest, that garage next door actually is from that structure. I can't tell how much based upon any of the materials we have there, but in any event, it is actually set back from the facade of that structure, even though it's a non-contributing structure in the particular instance. And I would note that I think the work that's been done here is fabulous. I love the additional other items that are proposed here to be done. Is it okay to speak? Just my piece? That way I won't have to later. Otherwise, I can hold off.
Let's just do the question piece.
Yeah. In that case, those are my
observations.
Questions and observations on some of the discourse.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other questions in the question period? Okay, that's fine. Staff, do you have any responses to testimony up till now? You feeling okay? All right, Sally, you have something?
Thank you, Mayor Weber. I would just conclude by saying that I'm not sure the board would concede that all five, or that the 4 out of the 5 of those factors were met from D1. I think in the board's view, this does kind of alter the space that is the primary facade, if not technically sort of a visually altering that space by having something that's in front and sort of sticks out further. So I think would argue that this is an alteration of the space that embodies the contributing status, which is kind of by definition the primary facade. So I just wanted to note that. I'm not sure that the board would concede that that's, that is not a problem, in addition to the concern about sort of further diluting the features that make up the contributing status. And in terms of the floor plan, I did actually look at the staff report from 209 Delgado, and I just wanted to confirm, based on this drawing, that Councilor Ives was correct that the carport next door is set back from the facade according to the architect's. And just, am I upside down? There we go. Not intuitive to me. Okay, so you can see on the lower right-hand corner, this was the drawing of the proposed carport from the aerial site plan, and you can see that it is set back from the facade that faces the street. So, and I don't know that maybe I should enter this into the record. I don't actually have copies of this for everyone, but we can make it a part of the official record anyway, right? So I'm going to mark it as Exhibit J, just so that can be a part of the record here, and I'll give it to the clerk. Thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you very much. The appellant.
I have a follow-up question for the attorney. Were they required to be 10 feet back from the primary facade?
The provisions in D1 apply only to additions to a contributing structure. Because 209 is a non-contributing structure, those that portion of paragraph D9, none of those actually apply to 209.
So they were 10 feet back for what reason?
I don't know if it's 10 feet, but I think it was just the way it was designed. I think there was kind of room there, just kind of fit on. It looks like to me that was a place where they were able to fit.
I'm sorry, I thought that it was 10 feet back from the primary facade. That's not correct.
At 209 Delgado? Councilor Rivera, I'm not sure. All I wanted to confirm was that it is further back. It is not. It doesn't stick out closer to the street in the way that the proposed carport at 211 does.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor.
Go ahead, Councilor Mayorworth.
So, Sally, based on your last comment about what the board was looking at, I assume, so they weren't just looking at the blue, which is the contributing structure. You think they were looking at the kind of the whole footprint?
I think they were looking at, because it's sort of been consolidated into a larger piece, visually I think it kind of presents as all one house. So I think although they knew that portion of the structure was non-contributing, I still think that because it sort of presents as all one house, that it stuck out further, even though it wasn't attached to the portion that's contributing. I think they viewed it as still sort of interfering with that part of the contributing structure.
And so that helps me understand the minutes on page 31 of January 8th. They spend some time thinking about the difference of the garage.
Yeah, they were definitely looking at all of the massing of...
Right, and again, the garage is non-contributing.
Correct.
But interesting that I think it fits into your theory that they were looking at the whole instead of, or, I don't know.
Yeah.
Rather than just the blue part.
That was my understanding. Again, I can't read their five minds perfectly.
But I was just trying to.
That was my understanding.
Yeah, and I guess one of my questions asked, but then when you talked, me understand, I think, at least what they were thinking when they were asking questions as with regard to the height of the garages being different, and how that affected the overall property and the south facade. So I don't.
Councilor, that was my understanding of their thinking.
Councilor Harris?
Well, it's not a question, but I just wonder, since we're to hear it de novo, I mean, how far do we have to go to figure out what they were thinking? I don't think we have to necessarily. I think it's up to us to decide what we think. So that's what I'd like to focus on.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilor Harris. I would agree with that. You you have all this information in front of you, the same information the board had, and at this point you've probably spent more time reviewing it than they had that night because they were on a large docket of cases as well. So, and you have, I think, the relevant code provisions to apply.
Councilor Abeyta.
Thank you, Mayor. So is it the portal that's making it, or making us consider this in addition to a contributing structure? Is that why we're considering it? Why is it?
Thank you, Councilor Abeyta. I'm not sure that there was any finding that this is in addition to a contributing structure. Yeah, I mean, the addition is definitely added to the non-contributing portion.
So if these were two separate properties, the carport.
Arguably.
Thank you.
Councilor Vihil-Coppler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've heard a lot of, I think, maybe so, I'm not sure. I'm just not real good with that. But it's a question for Carol Johnson. I see in our documents, and I believe I heard the Assistant City Attorney say earlier that recommended approval. Now, the case?
Well, approval. That was, yes, on the original application, the staff recommended approval. It was presented then to the Historic District Review Board, who recommended denial of this one of the three components of the request.
And so in your recommendation for approval of the carport, is it yours and your staff's thought process there that it did meet the code?
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you.
We now offer the appellant a chance for a closing statement. No more than 5 minutes, please.
I'll be briefer than that. Thank you, Mayor, councilors. So just quickly, in response to the Assistant City Attorney's most recent, I would just refer the council to of the staff report, the staff memo that you received from the City Attorney for this appeal this evening. On page 4, it lists these applicable code provisions. If I could have the screen. That, well, I can do it myself. Here we go. These code provisions that are applicable. And she states affirmatively that 2 through 5 we are in compliance with. And the only one she questioned was number 1. And I think we've shown pretty clearly that there was nothing presented, nothing in evidence, nothing even discussed or stated that anything about this carport threatened the historic status of this building. So she was at the hearing, she wrote the findings, and she affirmatively states that we are in compliance with 2 through 5 here. So I just think it was important to point that out. Again, we do not have to assume what the board was thinking, because that's why we have findings of fact. That is the purpose of them. And, I think an element of this that our client, Mr. Meyer, briefly touched on is we've lost some of the residential neighborhoods. Properties get very expensive. Properties are sold. Things are commercialized. And yet it has been a common theme and a common thread in governing documents and planning documents that we need to support people residing in our historic neighborhoods. We need to maintain the residential character. What makes them special are the people. It's not the buildings, it's the people that want to live there and what in preserving these very special structures. And encouraging and supporting people living on the east side of time comes with things like, I'd really like to have my car covered in the winter. I might want a solar panel on my roof. This is the type of very simple improvement that encourages and allows for people to live here. And that's more important than anything, frankly. We have demonstrated we are 100% compliant with code. Land use staff has said we're 100% compliant. And because of that, we ask for you to overturn the denial of the court. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to now close the public hearing part of this proceeding, and we will move to deliberations and motions by the governing body. Now, Councilor Ives, is your turn to go through the logic you were taking us through before.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, before the logic, I just wanted to say nothing in what I'm saying is meant to detract from the good work that has been done with this residence by the owners over the course of time. Clearly, they have devoted a great deal of care and stewardship to this property, which I think is laudable and to be appreciated. And in of the three items that are involved, granted only one of those with regards to the carport is on appeal, the restructuring of the wood to match the entrance on the primary facade is fabulous, and redoing the garage doors into a more coherent form likewise. With issues in historic zones, we struggle not infrequently with what exactly entails and what it means. We have a great deal of expertise in the Historic Design Review Board, and I suspect everybody up here on the die at some point in time has expressed the position that we try and respect what that body does and what they say. That has certainly not stopped us from contravening them when we felt they were not accurate. And this matter, as has been detailed, is de novo. So look and interpret as we will our own sense of the code based upon the presentations and that have been made tonight and the information in our packet. I struggle, as you can clearly tell, with that one language in the code with regards to setback in the instance. To me, it ultimately more sense to interpret that in terms of the lot as a whole, as opposed to looking at the fact that there is detachment between things to which different pieces are in fact attached. For that reason, I cannot support the appeal, but I would only say it certainly has nothing to do with the design, which I quite frankly find attractive, but for me, ultimately, that's not quite the issue that we're dealing with under the historic ordinance in the instance. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. I have to take the opposite view from Councilor Ives, because I do believe that what's been proposed then and now is in compliance. And so, again, I'm looking at page 4, and although perhaps, certainly it's subject to interpretation. We just heard Councilor Ives say so. But I'm looking at the second sentence at the top of the page. It says, to accomplish this purpose, the code limits the types of remodeling additions that may be made to contributing structures in their primary facades. Well, we know that this carport is not part of the contributing structure, and as such, it's an appropriate distance away from the primary facade. So, and then the fourth point, then, they may need to clarify. I'm sure there's a number of places that our code can be clarified. Take it to mean that the additions are not permitted to the side of the existing footprint. And I think that refers back to contributing structures in their primary facades. So I don't think the 10-footer rule applies here. And then I'll have to say I agree with what Ms. Beninato said earlier. I think that when it came down to it, that the board made a subjective decision, and I also agree with her that I'm making a somewhat subjective decision, because I do not believe that this addition detracts from the primary facade. We've heard the neighbors testify, the people are living with it. Everything I've seen tonight tells me that there'll be significant improvements without detracting from the primary facade. So I support the appeal. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other comments at this time?
Before your motion, I just want to say, in my defense, about what the board was thinking. I realize this is de novo, but understanding where they were coming from and how they applied the facts to the code, we understand how to apply the facts to the code, or how different ways, as we've just heard too, about thinking about that. So I don't think it's irrelevant, and I want to say that.
Okay. I don't think so either. Any other comments before we go? Yes, Councilor Beal-Koppler, please.
All right, I have to say a couple of things. One is, with all due respect to Councilor Ives, I wasn't elected to this city council to rubber stamp any committee or anything, and I do agree we do have to give some support to the people that we appoint to some of these boards, but I don't think any body is foolproof. They don't work with the code every day. They have to make some assumptions, and sometimes they don't. And I would have to say that staff works with the all the time, every day. We pay them to do that. They sit in their chairs over I'm sure, and they are able to make distinctions that sometimes an appointed body who we don't even know what, a lot of times they don't really have the relevant experience to be appointed. It doesn't matter. They're political appointees. And so, yes, I think we should, but no, we should not rubber stamp them. And I think that's why we're de novo. We have brains. We were all elected to decisions. I think we need to put a little humanity, a lot more than we do making up assumptions about our code. It is what it is, and unfortunately we have to work with it that way. But, we have to do our jobs that the people elected us to do, and we're the bucks. We have every right to say what we think and to vote the way we do. And sometimes we do get it right, and some people think we get it wrong. So I'm not afraid of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Lindell.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to grant the appeal review decision and direct staff to prepare findings of fact and conclusions of law consistent with this motion.
Second.
Okay. Is there any discussion on this motion? We had some.
Repeat.
I move to grant the appeal, reverse the board's decision, and direct staff to prepare findings of fact and conclusions of law consistent with this motion.
Was there a second?
There was a second, but if anyone has a final discussion moment, this is the opportunity. Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councillor Beta?
Yes.
Councillor Harris? Councillor Ives?
No.
Councillor Lindell? Councillor Rivera?
Yes.
Councillor Romero Worth?
Yes.
Councillor Vihal Coppler?
Yes.
Councillor Villarreal?
Yes.
Mayor Weber?
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Thank you. Thank you all for your patience and for coming down. Appreciate everybody's civility in this matter, and appreciate your bringing your community together to talk about this with us. Thank you very much. And with that, unless I hear otherwise,